Everybody hear me?
Okay. Yes, yes. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Hallelujah. Father in heaven, Yahweh Zebaoth.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for this day. Thank you for Shabbat. And thank you for your words written on your people's hearts. Thank you for leading us with your Ruach HaKadosh. And thank you for this gathering this day in sitting and dwelling and listening to the magnificence of studying your words. Thank you for the reverberation of your communicating to each and every one of your people what you have to say. Hallelujah. Shem YHUH, Yahweh Zebaoth. Amen.
Man. So let's pick up. This is January 21st of 2024, just for a date stamp. And we're going through this chart, which is on the eriktology.net site. It's just called names. Last week we covered basically Memnoon, bumped into Samic. So today we're looking at this section of Samic Ayin Pei, bumping up into Zadi. So if you go to eriktology.net, if you go in articles, not graphics, it says names. That's this chart. You're free to download it, get it printed off if you want to. And then it says names in English. And what I did is I went through and kind of made, I think there's 4 pages where I took the definitions of these words from Klein's dictionary, maybe a few other things too. When I say that, what I mean is Klein's dictionary, even though it's a comprehensive etymological dictionary, comprehensive means it's covering the whole span, the whole scope. I found that Klein's is not really comprehensive. It's very, it covers a good spread, but it's not everything. So just so you know, you will find things in Strong's that you don't see in Klein's and vice versa. And then there's Thayer's and Young's, and there's other lexicons and concordances. And even on the online, sometimes what I'll do, it's like, what's the Hebrew word for measure? We'll talk about that in a little bit. What's the Hebrew word for measure? Well, you can't go to Klein's and find that out. I was thinking of modifying the dictionary and putting out another publication one of these days, which was more like a thesaurus with synonyms. So if you said, well, what's the word for measure? If you knew one of the words, you could find it. And then there's a list of all the other synonym words, which I think would be really helpful. What I've done is written in the margin of the dictionary other words over the years, just so I can see one and jump to the other one. But anyway, if you look at other sources than simply only Klein's, you'll see things that Klein's doesn't even mention. It's like, why doesn't he mention it? Couldn't tell you that. But sometimes one particular definition or one word that he doesn't even have listed as a real word will all of a sudden go, oh gosh, so there it is. It's just amazing how that works. But so anyway, the idea of these various names, I think I'd mentioned this before. I don't know that I actually showed you this. There's a fellow by the name of Dr. Sakina, and he did this book called His Glorious Names. It's about an inch thick, and every page, for example, here, just random open up, says, my fellow, that the man that is my fellow. And it's Ayin Mem Yod Tav. And he says, Ayin is an eyeball, which means no. Mem means mighty. Yod means work. And Tav means covenant. So the knowing mighty one works his covenant. Okay, that's the basic procedure that Dr. Sakina has used. And he's got, looks like 350 or more pages. Every page is a different word. So you have 350 words. In fact, here, this one I just opened up to Yodeh Vav He. He has Yahweh save, Psalms 20, verse 9, but then he has Yod means work, Shin means sharp, and Ayin means watch. So actually he's using Yod Shin Ayin here. And it says the hand securing existence works keeping sharp watch. Okay, here for Shem, which is simply the word name, but remember Shem also means here and there. Pei Aleph means here. I think Hey Aleph also means here, but Shin Mem can mean here or there. Here he uses the translation there, but he says Shin means sharp, Mem means mighty. So Yahweh Shem, or Shem, means the hand securing existence is sharp and mighty. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is, here's a picture of Sakina and his wife. He's not doing so well right now, from what I understand. He's I want to pray for him, but illness. But my point is, in mentioning this, is that the value that you ascribe to the inscribed letter affects how you will perceive a word, which then affects your definition of a word, which then affects your complete understanding of the verse that falls within a context, which falls within the passage. We're going to bump into Revelation, specifically Revelation 10, verse 7, and then chapter 11, verses 1 and 2, probably in the second hour. But why I'm saying that, just to give you a heads up, is that I was looking at what I call the ISR, which is Institute of Scripture Research. It's a blue covered text Bible, which is simply called the Scriptures. ISR is written down the bottom, Institute of Scripture Research, printed, I think it was 1988 in South Africa, or 83 or something like that. But anyway, I use that generally for the English translation, especially the New Testament. That has the full 66 book collection, but it doesn't have the other books. And of course, Stone's Tanakh doesn't have the New Testament. But what I'm saying is, I was looking at a certain verse there, and then I was talking to a fellow on the phone, and he read from a different translation. I was looking at the word measure, and he read from his translation, and instead of the word measure, it said anoint. And it's like, is it anoint or is it measure? That's two completely different concepts. That was Revelation 11, verse 1. But he said he saw this angel, this messenger, who gave him a rod by which to measure the dwelling place of Elohim. And the other one said, by which to anoint the temple. Well, how would you anoint the temple? Here, this is for doing some drafting work, but this is a measuring stick, broken into inches and then into eighths of inches. You don't anoint with this, you measure with this. So what's the word for measure? I looked online. I just went to Safari and said, what is the Hebrew word for measure? So even if I don't have any other books, I can at least do that. Typically, I would use Brown Driver Briggs, but if you don't have one of those, it has what's called the Englishman's Concordance, where you can actually look up the Hebrew word, and it'll give you where it's found. See, if you use Strong's Concordance, you look up the English word, and then it'll tell you how many different Hebrew words have been used by that English word to reference. So if I was going to say, what's the word for measure in Strong's, I could look that up. But just so you know, we'll get into later in Revelation, but the three words for measure are mem. It said Yod Dalet Hey. Well, Mem Dalet would be the two-letter root, Mem Dalet Dalet, the three-letter root. It's where we get the concept of made, like tailor-made, like something stretched to fit, a tailor-made garment, for example. Suited, a tailor-made suit. MD, mode, the way something is done, a certain, by design, perfectly suited. That's made, mem dalet, dalet. The other word for measure online is what they said, it was ayin resh kaf. Well, that's erik, as in eriktology, which is as a study, eriktology, but the word erik, ayin resh kaf, where we get in English the word eureka, which is I found it, city in Northern California, but it also means to assess, appraise, evaluate. Like, what's your house worth? Call the county assessor. He'll come over and he knows what's going on and he'll give it a certain value for a certain year, according to other standards of consideration. It means index. It means lexicon, dictionary, archives, or registry. You go to a library and all the things are organized, that's erik. You go to the library where they have the files of where the books are, to put everything in that kind of systemic order, that's ayin resh kaf. You go to a museum where they've cleaned up and set up and labeled and put everything in such a way that you could go, oh, that's what this is. That's ayin resh kaf. To put something in order or rows and columns where you can compare, consider, wrap your mind around it, see it from different perspectives, all that's ayin resh kaf. It then means to be able to give something a different regard than you would have had, than you did have, or to be able to go, oh, okay, or maybe I don't even agree. For you to be able to see what's going on so that you can either choose to agree or disagree or change your thinking so that if you want to agree based on what somebody said, for example, if I was to look at Dr. Sikina's book and say, mem, every single time he has mem in a name, he uses it for mighty. Well, Frank Seekins on the Hebrew Word Pictures book says mem is chaos. Well, something chaotic is mighty. Something mighty could be chaotic, but I've been saying mem is like a womb, or mem is a place, a pool of water, a laver. If you think a wash basin is the same as mighty or chaos, how, if I was to suggest they're the same thing, how do you do that? So I'd have to sit there and go, if my hands have gotten toxic or filth, or they're just not as clean as I'd want them to be, I put them into a turbulent pool of water and I swoosh them around and then it knocks the stuff off, and mightily that water cleanses my hands. Okay, there, I've reconciled all those definitions. But to say mem is a womb, oh gosh, what do you do with that? A womb, to be pregnant. There's a word spelled aleph mem. M. Emma in Hebrew is the word mother. So it's Emma. Wizard of Oz story, remember the lady was called Auntie M? So it was Dorothy's surrogate mother. Her aunt was her, you call it her foster mother, stepmother, whoever it was, Auntie M. That's Hebrew for mother. But aleph mem also means nation. So a whole country of people. And it also means metropolis. A metropolis, a city. So if I'm trying to wrap my mind around a mother, a nation, and a metropolis, how is that aleph mem? Well, aleph, if I looked at as mighty, the letter aleph itself meaning strong and powerful, like an arrowhead, like an ox head, coming from somewhere towards a destination, which isn't even listed, it's just aleph mem. But if I think of mem as a womb, it's like, oh, well, there's the mother. But how does somebody get to be a mother? Well, if you're a surrogate, foster, Auntie M, different story. But if you're the natural mother, you had to get pregnant. Well, what happened to get pregnant? Somebody else enters your womb and deposits a seed, which then takes harbor, refuge within your womb and starts growing and developing until the day it's born, when it births as its own entity. So you are the temporary vessel of incubation, gestating for a period of time as time goes on until the progress is developed and the product, the birthed child, is now on its own. And then at that point, the role of the mother takes on a different nature. But what I'm saying is, how is that a metropolis or a nation? Well, a nation's economy, in order to sustain the safety and well-being of its people, has to provide for defense, protection around them from wild animals or weather or enemies. But it also has to make use of natural resources, and it has to put out a product of some kind. So generally, a nation or any people group, even if it was a little tribe or a village, has to have some type of economy, whether it's farming or forestry or fishing, mining. There's resources on the face of the earth that the people go out and gather, bring them into the enclave where there's, you might say, dynamic processes. I understand what somebody had said, that in the Bible days, the Old Testament days, the way towns were set up is that you had a central fire right in the middle of town. And then, like drawn like a target, around that, you have basically businesses, maybe a bakery, maybe a blacksmith, maybe whoever might have use of that fire. Those would be the first businesses in close proximity to the fire. Then another circle around that would be other businesses, and then other things, and then you've got the residences, and then you've got the fields, the farm fields. Where this subject came up, people were, this was like 20 years ago, people were having a discussion saying, why would Elohim tell Israel, do not kindle a fire on the Shabbat, the Sabbath day? What if it's freezing cold outside? Or what if you're ill? What if you need some warmth? Don't do it, it's a sin. Gosh. And so I remember I heard a story once, which I've told before, that during the days of, for example, the Inquisition or various pogroms where they were hunting down Jews to torture them, kill them, steal from them, banish them, somebody said, boy, those Jews are tricky. They're sneaky. You can never quite find one. And the guy said, it's easy to catch a Jew. What you do is you go out on a cold morning on Saturday morning and go up to the little bluff that, overlooking the town, the village, and see which chimney doesn't have any smoke coming out of it. They're the Jew. They're not going to light a fire on Saturday, no matter how cold it is. Go get them. Wow, that easy. Why would Yahweh do that? Why would he give his people that easy of a target to recognize them? But why would he actually tell his people, look it, on Shabbat, stay in bed bundled up if you have to, but do not make a fire? And so the people at this congregation were discussing this, and somebody said, because he had done the research. Now, I don't know if this is true, but this is what he said. He says, it's a misinterpretation. He says, what he meant was, back in those days where they had the central fire in the middle of town that was the commercial fire, do not light that thing up on Saturday. But that wasn't the same as having your own little fire in your house to keep warm, to make a pot of tea. It's like, what? Are you kidding me? Does that mean for hundreds of years now, 3,000 years, Jews have been suffering under a misconception? A misconception, that's bad memming. What did he say and what does he mean? Misconception, the mem in the womb, the little joke there. Anyway, what I'm saying is, what did he say? What does he mean? And what does he want us to do? We're not trying to offend him, but if he didn't say you can't have a little fire to keep warm or to have a pot of tea, now the Jews won't, and I'm not trying to say be sacrilegious or offend their sensibilities, but what I'm saying is, what did he really say and what did he really mean? And how do we do what pleases Abba's What is he looking for? How do we please his heart saying, look, we're doing what you said? And if I genuinely think, the guy that did the research was real serious. He knew the language, he knew the customs, he did a lot of research. And I wasn't there, but I heard about that study that those guys did at that other congregation. And it's like, I'm willing to believe that they were right. Now, somebody could say, well, I'm willing to believe that we can eat pork, so shut up. It's like, believe whatever you want to believe. I'm not trying to tell somebody what to do. I'm trying to discuss the teaching in a rational way and say, listen, bottom line, you got only yourself to blame, and you're going to stand in front of them. And the book of Revelation says in a number of places that the books are open and people will be judged according to their works. Yet as a Christian, it was like, hey, there is no works to be judged. We're all righteous in Christ. We got his blood. He's our claim to fame. He's our righteousness, and there's no judgment. It's the other people that don't have them that will be claim to fame. I couldn't say, am I slightly tilted to one side? Is that what you're saying? I'm not sure. I didn't quite see what you said there. Is that better? Anyway, the point is, if he really said, based on the way they had the design of their villages, don't light up the commercial fire. All right. I can hear that. I can go along with that. I can say, great, thank you, but I'm not going to beat anybody up or condemn them if they have a means to keep warm in their house on a freezing cold day. So this idea of Mem, is it a womb? Is it birthing a child? Is it a nation? Is it a metropolis? It's bringing in information, processing it, and putting out a product. So what I just did, taking the instruction, see, that would be the coffin lamed. That's like the picture of the barbecue grill in the bronze altar of sacrifice, right inside the door of the Mishkan. Right inside the big white fence is the barbecue grill. It said right inside the fence. And it's like, mentioned this before, that Andrew Hoy draws it like, here's the fabric fence, and then there's a kind of a loop made, and it's like right there. It's like the fence is what, a foot away from the, it's like, how do you process an animal? Or is it 3 feet away? Or how big is this loop in the fence material that you're not getting blood and wrestling this animal? And if it was right inside, is it 3 feet, 5 feet, 10 feet? Probably not more than 10 feet. If it was right inside. And then there was the covered place off in the distance, and halfway between the altar and the covered place, half that distance is where the laver was. So in trying to picture how this Mishkan is set up, what I've done with it is to say, when Elohim says, I put before you life and death, Moshe says that, actually, was it Deuteronomy 4, Deuteronomy 6? And I encourage you to choose life. Put before you life and death, blessing and cursing. You can either choose life or choose death. He didn't say choose life or else you die. He said choose life or choose death. It's an active choice, absolutely proactively volitional on your part, choosing life or choosing death. If you don't choose death, you don't live by default. If you don't choose life, you don't die by default. What you do with your life is an active choice. So as soon as somebody is born, or perhaps even before they're born, we don't know, each individual makes the choice for himself. So for us to take in the information means if we choose life, we enter the kingdom of Yod Vav. There's the big white fence, letters Het, Tet, Yod in the pattern. Then if right in front of you is the Torah, right in front of you, learn the instructions, the protocols of the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of Yahweh. What did he say? How does it work in here? Well, you should have known before. No, you don't know. So for somebody to say, oh, the Sabbath day is the prerequisite fee, the pass, you might say, for getting into the kingdom, I disagree. I remember I've heard it said, I might be wrong, but I've heard it said that the Seventh-day Adventists say if you don't keep the Sabbath day, you can't enter the kingdom. It's like, wait a minute, where do you learn about the Sabbath day? You don't hear rumors outside. You have to come in and learn. Well, if you come into the big white fence and learn his instructions, you're already inside the fence, aren't you? You can't learn outside the fence, outside. So I use the model of the Mishkan ever since 2004 when I first saw this thing. Just so you know, the processing, the thinking, the memming, the thinking process is, here's this model of the Mishkan. What was it? The Mishkan starts there in Exodus, what was it, 25 verse 9, I think it is. And it says, Elohim says to Moshe, I'm showing you this pattern of the Mishkan that's here in the heavens, somehow in his realm, and you are to make it exactly like the pattern on earth. So the word pattern is tav, bet nun yod, tav. Bet nun yod is the word Beni, which is my son, which might mean Israel, or it might mean Yahusha, or it might mean you, my son. And then the letter tav is a prefix and a suffix. And you could say, well, if the tav, like Dr. Sakina says here, is a mark, a sign, it means something. It's a symbol, it's a mark. So I said before, if you have a contract, put an X and you sign your name. Why do we? Because we still use the same signography, the same logo of X. I agree. Here's my name. I consent. I'm right there. I'm giving a statement of my approval on purpose. And legally, if you are coerced with fear or extortion of threat, your signature doesn't count. It has to be volitional. That even in courts of law. If you're ever under duress, if you write your signature and you write the words under duress, whoa, your signature doesn't count. It's void. Do they know that? Someone once said, for example, if an officer of the law wants to give you a ticket and he says, sign here. If you sign it, then that means you're accepting the contract. But if you were to say, are there bullets in that gun? And he says, there certainly are. Well, yeah, I'm scared. Okay, if I write my name and I say under duress, I have not accepted the contract. I've been threatened. Okay, I'll sign my name. But if I write the words under duress, it's not a legal contract anymore. Just little things to know. What I'm saying is that if the letter Tav says you are now participant in this contract, then what might suggest the letter Tav at the beginning and the end? Well, that's two participants in the contract. And who's mediating the contract? Benny, my son. So I can read just the word Tav Bet Nun Yod Tav, Tabenit, as saying, my son is the mediator between the two signatories of a certain contract or covenant. Well, gee, is that Elohim and Adam? Is that Yahweh and Israel? Is Israel his son who's mediating, you might say, the reign of Elohim on one side and general humanity on the other? Well, in the book of Revelation, where it says, the saints will be kings and priests, sovereigns and Kohanim, Melachim and Kohanim. If everybody in his kingdom is a king and a priest, who are you officiating over? A bunch of heathens? Really? So for 1,000 years, there's going to be this millennial reign, and all the, let's say the, good people, all the people of the kingdom are going to be kings and priests. And then all the people that are part of your kingdom, or they go to your church, your temple, your synagogue, your priest over what? Are all going to be infidels and heathens and reprobates that give you nothing but grief? That's what's going on now, isn't it? So what's this millennial reign supposed to look like? What I'm saying is to read certain verses, to take in information, you choose life, you learn the protocol of the kingdom. You learn the constitution of the kingdom of heaven. You learn the ways of Yahuwah Elohim Zavot, Melech of Israel. And then the laver Memnun, like a womb, and Yahushua even said when he gave parables of the seed, the sower of the seed is his word. So the seed comes to your innermost parts, and whether you're not a female or a birthing person, you take his seed in and you nurture it, you think about it, you gestate it, you feed it. And whether you bring forth a product of a healthy you're going to, so are we as humans, as people, are we essentially surrogate, I would use the word cocoons, such that his word is within us, and then we're going to die one day and this body turns corpse. And yet from this corpus, somebody else emerges. Well, who's that? Well, I could say, according to the model, a mother gives birth to another entity, another consciousness, another atom. But yet in this model, why, it's ourselves. So I saw a picture the other day, I've seen it before, where there's this insect sitting on a leaf or something, and all of a sudden it starts looking weird, and all of a sudden the back of the insect breaks open, and this green thing emerges. It's metamorphosizing from like a snake shedding its skin. This insect was going from a pupa stage into the adult stage. And so instead of it being this kind of a camouflage gray-brown crawling on the ground, all of a sudden that shell which has no life in it, splits open, and this different colored creature with wings and antenna crawls out. And it's like, whoa, well, that's a picture of what I believe is going on with Memnoon. Meaning, if I say I'm a consciousness, Aleph, given a body, Bet, who gimmels around choosing, making choices, Dalet, and then there's information saying, choose life. Hey, oh, okay. And then like putting a stick shift into a transmission of a transmission into a certain gear on purpose, you push that stick shift in, and now you're locked into that speed. So the Vav, drawn with a straight, and then almost like the cup on top, it's like grabbing a stick shift and shoving it into gear. I'm choosing life. Boom. The next letter, Zion, is, well, then you die. Well, okay, this is one way to read the letters. I'm allowed to choose, Dalet, at the door, this or that, life or death. Hey, I suggest you choose life. Vav, okay, I'm choosing life. Or I'm not choosing life, I'm choosing death. Either way, then you die. Zion, time on earth is done. What's in front of us? Eternity. So Het is the 8th letter, and if you draw the 8 Arabic numeral, vertical, but if you draw it sideways, hey, that's the mathematical symbol of infinity. So this is now like this infinite realm. This is one way to read the letters. And then Tet is a full basket. So I could say, well, then the next letter, Yod. Well, if I go to a grocery store, the store itself is like this big letter Het. It's a compound. It's a place. And I go inside, and it's like, I will pick some of this and this and this, and I put it in a bag or a basket, a Tet. And then when I pay for it, it's Yod. It's now mine. I own this because I've made the transaction of ownership. Well, the word in Hebrew that means you've either made it yourself, you're the artist, you're the manufacturer, or you bought it, paid legal money for it, or made the legal exchange and it's now yours, is the word kuf nun hey, kana. So there's two words that sound like kana. One's kuf nun aleph, which means jealous, zealous, fanatical. Yahweh says that he's named himself Elkona, the jealous God, the zealous one. And he said, and certainly Kona I am. Kuf nun aleph. He said he's determined this reputation on purpose. And he's so good with it. He says, and I'm living it up. I'm playing into that reputation. Absolutely. And that's the word way up at the top somewhere. Where was it? Elkona. Gosh, I don't see it here. I thought it was way at the top. Well, anyway, we'll bump into it. Oh, it's the one for Ayin. Hey, Vav Aleph, Aleph Lamed, Kuf Nun Aleph. He is El Kona. So that was the one after Psalm. That was the one we're going to get to anyway. So the point is, for Yahweh to say, I've thought this all out, and I've determined that there's a certain way to be, and I'm so good with that's the way to be. I'm all over that. I'm going to be completely that. I'm going to be that on steroids, as they say. I'm going to be Elkona to the max, Elkona. And if anybody wants to disparage that, then that's on you. I love this stuff, and I'm going to be all about this stuff. And when he says that, interesting, looked up the word the other day. What's the Hebrew word for stuff? Stuff. Think about it. The word debar is word, speech, but it's also matter or thing or just stuff. So it literally means stuff. That's the word came up on online. So you could say, well, it's also words. It's also everything he's about is his stuff. He's about his moedim. So when he says there is choice best treasure, it's like, and the word edi means adornment, ornamentation. It's like he's dressed himself up in finery, the best stuff he could find, the best stuff he could make for himself. And he says, this is how I'm going to be known. This is my look, whether it's apparel or ornamentation. I mean, he's got these 12 stones that he talks about that put on the breastplate, which is called the chosen of the high priest. He also has them on the foundation of the stones of the New Jerusalem, because he likes that stuff. And so for us to say, well, if he likes this stuff, I want to like this stuff too, just because he does. So how do I get myself to like his stuff? I'm going to learn to appreciate what he appreciates. I'm going to learn to speak his language. I'm going to learn to, if he likes blue, purple, red, and white with gold, I'm going to do stuff blue, purple, red, white, and gold. If he likes these stones, okay, I'm going to think about these stones. If he wants to meet with his people on certain appointed days, Mikra Kodesh, I'm going to meet with him on those days. And if he says, don't learn the ways of the heathen, the pagan, the infidel, the apostate, those who worship Elohim, Achrim, other gods, gods of others, don't take their ceremonial rituals and do them like you're worshiping me. Don't do that. Okay, I'm not going to do that. And then, like I said before, when you see that, wait a minute, that's everything the Christian church has done. Now, I'm not just turning to them and saying, hey, you guys, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, I'm looking at information, memming, and I'm going, hey, if Yahuwah said, don't do this, why are we, myself participant at the time, why are we doing what he said not to do? Why are we doing what he said he hates seeing his people do? If he said he wants to see his people regard the seventh day Shabbat, why are we going along with somebody or some agenda which changed it to the first day on purpose because they wanted to prove that their voice was more authoritative than his voice? Why go along with that? Very simple. And then if I am left with choose life or choose death, I can read in scripture that anything which is not what he wants, anything which is what he doesn't want, everything which is contrary to his word is death. The wages of sin is death. Sin is not doing what he said, which is Torah. Not doing Torah is sin, which is the consequence of being death. So if he said, don't work on the seventh day, and somebody changes it to the first day, and we go along with that, the consequences of that is death, whether or not we knew it or understand it. But as soon as it's brought to our attention, we go, well, I want to choose life. What do I do? Repent, return, do what he said. So if I take in information based on his word, based on seeking and comprehending, it's like, nah, nobody told me. Well, now it's being known. I could say for 50 years of my life, nobody told me. I might have heard this or that. And it's like, what? Nah, never mind. They're idiots. They don't know. Okay. Some of these matters were never made an issue into my consciousness, even though I went to a number of different churches for 50 years. Very evangelical, Bible-believing, fundamental, hardcore churches. Never brought to my conscious, mindful attention to determine, to make a choice, to look, see, consider, and then behave accordingly, which is one reason for going over and over it now, just to bring it to people's attention. If anybody cares to listen and say, don't follow me, don't listen to me, I'm just telling you to think for yourself and better make your own life decision, because it's life or death. And if you make the wrong decision, you, as they say, you got hell to pay for it. You're going to catch hell if you make the wrong decision. Whether or not there's a true lake of fire that you are tormented forever, which the words say there is, but yeah, we'll talk about what the words say in a few places. But hey, it's your decision. But what's presented by Yahweh is choose life or choose death. Hey, I suggest you choose life. Oh, okay. So I'm going over the first 7 letters. That's your standard piece of Adam's life on earth. Pretty basic. And then if this letter Chet represents the eternal realm, if I go to a store and I gather things and I buy it, now that I possess this, that's Kuf Nun Hey, it's mine. Okay, so if I choose life, then I am his possession. I'm in his basket. He says, you're mine. Okay. Ani ladodi vedodi li. I am my beloved's. My beloved is mine. We somehow possess each other. And then there's a lot of tensions and struggles and turbulence, at least in every relationship, whether it's friends or whether it's lovers or whether it's a master and servant or pet owner, responsible party, whatever you want to say it, there's always turbulences. But the point is, that's the established, you're not going to get kicked out of the kingdom. Unless, of course, you say, I don't want any part of this and I rebel. But what are you rebelling against? His instructions. What are his instructions? Well, that's the barbecue grill. And I say that because the letter Kaf, the open hand, looks like lines of a barbecue grill. And if I turn the lines sideways, they're like lines of script. And if I lay them flat, it's like a strainer, like the floor of your shower, right? The water, if you drop your bar of soap, it won't go down the drain. It'll stay right there. But water goes through. So the barbecue grill keeps the meat up on top, and then the drippings of the fat and the juices drip through. The heat comes up. So cough, I can see, is like a strainer. Well, the word for kidney, even in English, starts with the letter K, and in Hebrew, it starts with the letter Kaf, which is basically a filter, a strainer. Lamed bet, the word for heart, LB, Lamed bet, but the B in Hebrew can also be pronounced as a V, the letter V or the letter B. Just like in Spanish, the same letter has 2 sounds, so you'd pronounce the word for heart in Hebrew as lav, like lava, molten magma of rock, volcanic rock, lava. It's also the word for love. So in English, the word love comes from the Hebrew word for heart, or to be inflamed or ravished, or whether the heart is actual heating, burning lava magma, or whether it's just inflamed with fascination and zeal. It's the same. It's just the same thing. And then if you duplicate the bet and make it lamed bet bet, so it's lavav, or maybe it's labab. So if you look at the word for dog is kaf lamed bet, it would be pronounced kalab or kalav. Is it kalav or kalab? Well, it's both. Caleb. Caleb is the word for dog, but kaf lamed means all, and Lamed Bet is heart. So Caleb means all heart. That's literally the name of the word dog, all heart. If that's what Adam invented, then Adam, back when he was naming the animals, would have had to stop and look and maybe interact with this animal for a bit. And how many animals did he name? 42 animals? Or 4,200 animals? Or 40,000 animals? I mean, how many animals were presented to Adam when he was told to name the animals? Either way, what was his mechanism? He had to know the Hebrew language, see the nature, the character of that animal, pin the two together, then it became. So he had to notice in a dog, some primordial Kelab Kadmon, the primeval dog, canine of some sort, say, this guy's all heart. Okay, that became its name. And so he did with all the other animals. So one reason to think that Hebrew was the original language is because everything, Isaac Moses's book, The Origin of Speeches, another study on this, but it all goes back to Hebrew. Well, where did he get that? Elohim had to download into Adam's head how the Hebrew language works. And whether or not Abraham had written orthography, he at least had to have the understanding of the letters and what they mean and how to spell words. That would have been, on day one, Adam was given how to spell words. And when he named Eve, it wasn't Eve, it was Hua, because she's the mother of all living. It's like, what? There's a reason for every name. So my point is, Dr. Sakuna is going to give you the definitions as he sees them. I'm not going to disagree, but I'm going to say I see the letters with different meanings. I might see the letters with a bunch of different meanings. So I've been sitting here talking about this mem nun in regards to aleph mem nun giving birth, but not just giving birth to a child with another, call it a soul, a spirit, but it's yourself being born unto eternity. So this mortal flesh is going to one day cease, stop, die like that insect that the birthed nooned self emerges out of unto eternity. So just like the caterpillar eats greens, spins a cocoon, chrysalis, appears to die, turns into a molten slurry. Hey, there's Mem, a molten slurry inside his chrysalis, and then comes out a butterfly or a moth, nooning, flying, drinking nectar rather than chewing on greens. That's this picture. Same one, but a different essence. So I see that as saying, okay, Memnoon is when we listen to Yahuwah's words and with a good attitude, take them in, the baby, the new life that's formed within us is ourself unto eternity. Well, then what's in front of the noon is Samik Ayin Pei. So Samik, even though it's drawn like this telephone pole, the mast of a ship, backbone with ribs, skeleton, engineered structure, I could also say, well, that's kind of the picture of an adult insect with the wings. This different creature. The word ayin pei is the word for bird or to fly. Samik ayin is to literally venture out on a journey. The word for wings, so it's like being equipped with the wings. Then the zadi is a picture with this wing sprouted, like a butterfly, the body emerging out of the chrysalis and has to unfurl the wrinkled up wings. And then as soon as it stretches out its wings, and then it goes up into the sky. Well, the letter kuf, the vertical line, the circle is like ascending into the clouds. This is all pictures of flying. And so there's this one verse where it says, forget off the hand, but it says, who are these that fly like a cloud, like doves to their coat windows? And he said, boy, when the next Exodus happens, not the Exodus in the rapture off the face of the earth, but the exodus of taking his people from the lands that they're scattered back to the lands that he promised our forefathers, man, it's going to be so fantastic, so great. Nobody's even going to remember to mention that exodus where he dried up the sea and had 3 million people cross the Red Sea on dry land. Astounding. How could he pull such a thing off and then close the water back over on the entire Egyptian army? This is going to be more mind-blowing than that. Well, how's he going to do that? Well, I could imagine that perhaps when that little verse, and it just kind of hangs there by itself, who are these that fly like a cloud? What if that's the way he brings us back to the promised land? Now that would be something. But the only problem with that is that, what about my stuff? My stuff! I got trailers full of stuff. I'm not going to be dragging those. I guess I could hire somebody to, but if we're flying, just what about our stuff? Unless our stuff is his Devarim. If our stuff is his Devarim, what did Joseph say to Jacob, his father? He said, I'm vizier, prime minister, essentially, of Egypt. I own the country. Anything I say, my word is the command. Just come, leave your stuff there. Okay, you can bring your favorite pillow if you need, but I've got everything you need. Don't worry about it. I got everything. Don't worry about it. Okay, can we leave our stuff behind? So the idea of saying, if we enter the kingdom of Yahuwah and say, it's a whole new world, a whole new consciousness, it's a whole new reality, somehow I've got to leave my concerns, my fears, I got to leave it all behind and just, it's over, it's done. Take on this whole new identity, this whole new place, this whole new way, this whole new, who am I? What am I? Well, that's the word for bride. Kala, Kaf, Lamed, Aleph is the word for bride, as in wedding, bride. But it also means, Kaf, Lamed means all, complete, whole, every, each, any. The hey suffix is a feminine suffix, so it can mean a bridal canopy would be considered a kala, but it also means the girl has given totally of herself into this relationship with her husband. But being so, the word kaf lamed hey also means annihilated, destroyed, exterminated. It's like, what? It's like you burn the bridges behind you. There's no going back to Egypt. Vikings, when they landed, sometimes they're saying, okay, we're going to burn the boats and there's no leaving. It's do or die. We're going to either conquer or be killed. That's it. It's the same meaning of the word Eber, ayin bet resh, which is the word for Hebrew. It also means to cross over and never go back. To become Hebrew, Abraham went from Ur the Chaldees, where his father and his ancestry was, the area of Babylon, and went up to Hebron into the promised land, but there was no going back. And when Abraham, the book of Jasher talks about it, Abraham was pondering the matters, and his father, going by the name of Terah, was an idol maker, apparently a pretty good one. He made like really, really expensive idols, maybe for the palace, maybe for the wealthy elite of the city, of the empire, but his stuff was really expensive. Not everybody's read the book of Jasher, so I'll just tell this story. So Abraham, being raised in that culture, probably had some kind of worshipful regard of the idols and stuff, but somehow Elohim was just kind of knocking on the door of his head for a few years. And so one day he's sitting there and he's looking at these idols his father had made and realized, wait a minute, these things are just wood and metal and stone, and these are just handmade, what's called an artifice, artificial. They're made by artistry, manufactured by human hand. Yeah, well, gosh, if these things represent real demonic powers, then whoa, you don't want to mess with those guys for messing with their symbology. But somehow he realized That's not true. That's all a bunch of hooey. These objects that we give such reverence to and punish anybody who looks at them askance, they're nothing but human manufacture. So he is filled with a kuf nun aleph, a zeal for truth. And he went in one night and he takes an axe and he just chops everything up except for the one idol of the principal deity. And he hung the axe around the neck. And the next morning, when people come to work in the shop and they see this, they go, "What?" I mean, it might have been millions of dollars worth of damage. Abraham, that somebody knew that to pin it on him. However, and they grab him and they drag him in here. They go tell his dad, and it comes in. And I mean, this is an outrage. It's a criminal act, probably worthy of some kind of torturous death. And they try to accuse Abraham, and he says, "What are you looking at me for? It's obviously that guy. Look, he's even still got the axe around his neck. The criminal weapon is in his hand. Don't look at me. Shut up. He's a statue. What do you mean he's got the weapon around his neck? Oh, so you're telling me he's just a statue, are you? What? It's like, boo, he just blew the whole cover right there. Well, he got run out of town, or he took off running out of town, and that was there's no going back. My point is, he made himself detestable to his culture of his ancestry. I've been told, quit saying Jesus Christ is the Antichrist. Why would I say that? Is he or isn't he? Who is this Jesus Christ? What is Christ? What is Antichrist? What is the Mashiach? What is anti or counter Mashiach? If Yahusha, now let's go by Hebrew words. If Yahusha is the word of Elohim, then anti-Mashiach, because the word Shiach literally means conversation, communication. Mashiach would be the object of communication. Well, that's word. So Mashiach is literally, by definition, word, not anointed. It can mean anointed. It can also mean one who goes swimming, gets wet, like anointed. But if Mashiach means the conversation, the communication of Elohim, and if that's the real Yahusha, then anything contradicting, different meaning, different wording, different exemplifying is literally antichrist. And anybody then who says Jesus said it's okay to eat pork is antichrist. Anybody who thinks that Jesus said doesn't matter which day is a holy day, when our Father said Shabbat, the seventh day is Yom HaShabbat, is the Kadosh day, then anybody who says otherwise is antichrist by definition of words. So Jesus Christ, if Jesus Christ as a word, as a glyph, as a logogram, if the words Jesus Christ are the archetypal phrase representing an entire system which is counter to the diction, the meaning, and the speaking of the Devarim of Yahuwah Zavot, the Elohim of Israel, as he said in his Torah, then that Jesus Christ is absolutely Antichrist by definition. And then when you go to read the book of Revelation, where it talks about the beast and the image of the beast speaking great blasphemies, why, that's exactly what that is. Imagine that. So when people say, oh, who's the Antichrist? By definition, it's Jesus Christ. Now, other people can do it too. Other people can say things and represent things and demand you fall down in front of idols. But I'm telling you, if somebody says you must fall down in front of the iconic imagery of Jesus Christ as he's your God, well, Yahuwah is Zavot's my Elohim. And if this guy represents a contradiction, Elohim Achrim, sorry. With that, we have to take a break. We're at 1 hour.